Hey there, it's Dave Keller here with StockCharts.com, and welcome to this special 5-part edition of the Final Bar. I'm on vacation this week in Ireland with my family, but wanted to give you some content while I was away. So I've recorded these top 10 charts to watch for August 2024. And what I thought we'd do through the course of this week, hit on 2 charts each day and then talk about one of the tools or techniques that I used to actually identify those stocks, or how I'm managing the trends, what drew me to them in the first place, what sort of levels and patterns I think are most important. So hopefully this series through the course of this week gives you some specific actionable ideas. These are charts I would argue are at really key moments that you should be aware of, and either as compelling investment options, or maybe even more so, just important charts to watch for key inflection points and to pay attention to how they trade around these levels. I would argue that while paying attention to the broad market environment, looking at the S&P, the NASDAQ, other charts, super important to me, and I'm sure to you as well. Looking at individual stocks and recognizing the message that you get back just from analyzing those individual stocks and trends, I think cannot be overstated. So hopefully this series gives you some ideas and also gives you some tools and techniques to use a great platform like StockCharts to better analyze these markets and navigate these uncharted markets pretty well. So first, session today, we're going to talk about 2 of the Magnificent 7 names, and I think that's the theme for today, the big mega cap growth stocks, and paying attention to, areas of the market that had been strong, that have been relatively weak in the last 6 weeks, and now all of a sudden, starting to push a little bit higher. The S&P and the NASDAQ really are driven primarily by these Magnificent 7 stocks, and so the performance of these names is super vital to pay attention to. That's why on my dashboard, I have this watch list, or this chart list that I pay attention to, and I literally look at it multiple times a day, because these 8 mega cap growth stocks are really driving returns, and they're in 3 sectors: technology, communication services, and consumer discretionary. And so focusing on these 8 names, making sure you're comfortable with the charts, making sure you recognize when they make key inflection points or break or hold key levels, I think is super important. And if you feel confused and uncomfortable about what's happening with the S&P and the NASDAQ, I would start your analysis, or maybe enhance your analysis, augment your analysis by looking deeper at some of these mega cap names, because the trends here are going to be reflected in the trends of our major benchmarks. I wanted to pick 2 of these that I think are more actionable. Some of these I think are sort of in transition, or they're sort of, it's sort of a choppy phase like a Tesla. I want to look at 2 particular charts that I think are pretty actionable here. Number 1's Meta. Number 2 is NVIDIA. Let's look at each of these one by one. So the chart of Meta, really when we talk about the dominance of the Magnificent 7 stocks, I would argue Meta is really an outlier. Tesla and Meta stand out to me as very different charts. Tesla, because it was obviously diverging quite a bit. And when mega cap growth stocks were leadership names earlier in 2024, Tesla was actually struggling quite a bit. Meta, you could argue in a lot of the same ways, right? It's one of the weaker names in terms of the primary trend, which really has been sideways since February, right? The chart of Meta over the last 12 months shows this big gap in early February. We did move higher for about another probably 10 weeks, 9 or 10 weeks after that gap higher. But from there, the upper end of that gap, which is around 450, has ended up serving as key support. And I love to use gap levels as support and resistance. I often will highlight the gap in a shaded area like this, which is called a range, support range or a resistance range, because the gap, you will often find stocks return to that gap. And then, whether it holds that gap range is super important. So the fact that Meta has found support in late April into early May, right in that 400 to 440 range, that lines up pretty much perfectly with the gap higher that we had. That's why we highlight the range. That's why we keep looking at it. From there, after that gap lower, which ended up being bought, right? You had the gap lower, and then the buying that happened soon afterwards really pushed the price to retest all-time highs from April, retested again in July. And you can see in May, here in July, and now early August, we've tested the lower end of the range. Now in early August and now mid-August, we're testing the upper end of the range. I think this is an important chart to watch here in the month of August, because at some point this range is going to break. And what I've learned about looking at charts like this over my career is a sideways trend like this can be an interesting swing trade, right? I mean, just betting on mean reversion and trading around that equilibrium price around 490 can be pretty profitable. However, as a medium-term or longer-term play, you look for when we exit that range. So one of two things could happen in August or September, obviously very soon. You know, option one, we break out to the upside. What would it look like if Meta broke above 540, eclipsing resistance from earlier in 2024? I think that sort of renewed strength would be a very bullish sign for Meta, a very bullish sign for the Magnificent Seven stocks, very bullish sign for mega cap growth if a stock like Meta can get above 540 and finally break out of this sideways range. One of my mentors, Ralph Acampora, one of his mentors, Alan Shaw, is credited with talking about the broader the base, the higher in space, meaning the broader that a stock is in this sideways consolidation phase, when it finally breaks out, what we call a big base breakout, the longer we've spent time in that basing pattern, the more upside potential a stock usually has. It's really sort of a, sort of building up momentum before that big break higher, and it's unleashed with buying power, elevating stocks to the upside. The other side of this, though, is what if Meta goes down to the lower end of this range around 450 and it no longer holds? What's been key with Meta in 2024 is that it's held that area of support. But if we get below 450, if we get below the 200-day moving average, which would be the first time in over a year that we would be below the 200-day, that I think would be a big argument for further deterioration for risk assets. If Meta is not able to get out of this range to the upside, and on top of that is not able to hold support, that's what a real bearish rotation in the market looks like. So again, Meta has sort of bucked the trend in terms of remaining relatively strong, remaining in this range, while the markets struggled here in July, holding support. If it would not hold support, that would be a problem. So in the month of August, I'm watching that 450 to 540 range. One of those levels is going to break, and I would be setting alert on both of those. Set alert for Meta over 540, Meta below 450. One of those is going to break, and let's monitor it. Second chart I'll talk about as part of the Magnificent Seven is NVIDIA. And NVIDIA, in this case, is sort of a proxy for the semiconductor space in general. There are a lot of charts that could be this, that could be, talked about here, like a monolithic power, MPWR, even just the semiconductor ETF like SMH or SOX. I'm looking at NVIDIA, though. I'm looking at 10 individual stocks this time around. And I think what's interesting about the chart of NVIDIA, it's similar in some ways to Meta in that we did bounce off of support in early August. Now, the difference here is that NVIDIA has not been range bound, right? So Meta's been kind of did this move in February and then is still in this range. So Meta's kind of, if NVIDIA sort of stayed in this 75 to 95 range, that's what the chart of Meta kind of looks like right now. NVIDIA actually gapped higher in May, so it broke out when Meta did not. But what's so important on the chart of NVIDIA, if you look at this, and I'll switch this to a candle chart just to make it a little easier to see. And we'll zoom into like the last 9 months, maybe 6 months, so we can see this in a little more detail. There have been a bunch of patterns called bearish engulfing patterns on the chart of NVIDIA. And it's fascinating having looked at candlesticks for a number of years now. Certain stocks, certain parts, certain environments, you will find candle patterns become way more prevalent. The chart of NVIDIA is marked by a series of bearish engulfing patterns that have been really good at helping us identify actionable, tradable tops. So here in mid-June, we had a bearish engulfing pattern. That's a big up day, a big down day. Day two's body, which is the open to close range, engulfs day one's body. And so that second day engulfs the up day. And so you sort of eliminated all that optimism and you have renewed pessimism. It usually tells you the next couple bars are most likely lower. We had another bearish engulfing pattern after a counter trend rally in early July. Here again in late July, as we tested the 200-day moving average from below, we had a bearish engulfing pattern. I think this is an important chart to watch because the chart has been remarkably consistent at identifying some of those tactical peaks using a candle pattern analysis. Right now, we are testing the 50-day moving average from below here in mid-August. And as the month of August progresses, I'd be very keen to see two things. Number one, does NVIDIA finally break back above the 50-day moving average? I think that would mean high confidence that we return back to that 135, 140 range, which are the peaks in June and July. And then you reassess and see if we're able to hold it. Question two, do you have another one of those candle patterns like we've had at pretty much every tactical peak here for the last 3 months. Do we have another one of those? And keeping an eye on candle signals. Again, what's great about a platform like StockCharts is we have ways to automate that sort of thing, right? So I'll show you in a minute how we can actually scan for candle patterns like the ones we just mentioned. So Meta is an important one because the question is, does it break out of the range? I think a similar idea for NVIDIA, right? Do we break above 120, which would get us out of this range? Do we not have any candle patterns that would suggest short-term weakness? Because that has been one of the markers of NVIDIA over the last couple of months is stalling out. And those bearish candle patterns just mean a short-term negative rotation. If we would rotate lower in the second half of August, it's all about the $100 level for me, which is a price gap from late May. That's also a big round number. That's basically where we found support in early August. I'd want to see that holding. So for me, setting an alert with NVIDIA above 120, NVIDIA below 100. I think that's the way to play these sort of binary signals. I mentioned using scans to look for charts like NVIDIA and others showing those rotations. Two things I will show you. Number one, if you go to where it says charts and tools, we have this thing called, where is it? Down here in the scans, I'll find it. Sample scan library. That's a good place to go. If you go down here, we've actually curated some of the scans that we found most helpful as we've been running this platform here for a couple of years. And I will tell you that candle patterns, like we talked about, we were highlighting bearish engulfing patterns. You can run that scan, which is just going to run a broad equity universe and look for charts showing that bearish engulfing pattern today. What I would encourage you to do is click on edit. That will actually turn it into put it into the scan engine as a line of code. You can then add additional criteria. So, okay, I only want to look at members of the S&P, or I only want to look at stocks in these two sectors, or I only want to look at stocks that are above an ascending 200-day moving average. These are all the sort of really cool capabilities that we can do. But if you're struggling on what sort of scans to run to find actionable turning points and actionable ideas, I would encourage you to use the scanning engine and go to these predefined scans. It's called what we call our sample scan library. This is a great way to look at some of the scans that other users have found helpful. Edit them and add them and customize them and tweak them and make them their own. Once you've done that, you can actually schedule those scans to run automatically. Imagine every day StockCharts is spitting out a list of tickers that fit a certain criteria. That's what I do. I would encourage you to do the same. All right, that's it for our first episode of this 5-part series, Top 10 Charts to Watch for August 2024. Today is about mega cap growth, NVIDIA, and Meta. What will the other 8 stocks be? Make sure you can tune in for the rest of the week. We'll share them one by one. I'm Dave Keller with StockCharts.com. Have a great one. We'll talk to you again soon.